For 20 years of marriage, I lived in a house full of love, laughter, and warmth, except for one door. The door to my husband's study. It was the only place in our home where I was never welcome. David, my husband, was gentle, kind, and caring in every way. But when it came to that room, his voice would change. His eyes would harden. He would simply say, "Promise me you will never step inside. That room is mine and mine alone." At first I laughed it off. What could possibly be so important inside? But as the years passed, my curiosity grew heavier. I would hear the faint scratching of a pen late at night. Sometimes muffled whispers, like he was talking to someone who wasn't there. The smell of ink, old paper, and something metallic would seep under the crack of the door. Still, I kept my promise. I stayed away, but promises don't outlive people. And the day David died, he left me not only a lifetime of memories, but also the key to his forbidden world. And when I finally unlocked that door, what I saw changed everything I thought I knew about my husband. We met on an ordinary spring afternoon, the kind of day that feels too simple to ever change the course of a lifetime. David was standing in the library near the classics section, carefully reading the spine of an old book as if it held the answer to some great mystery. I had walked in for something entirely different, a novel recommendation, but instead I found myself noticing the way he tilted his head while reading, the way he brushed dust off the cover with such quiet respect. He looked up, caught me staring, and smiled. Not the kind of smile you forget, warm, reassuring, and almost familiar, as though we had known each other for years. That was David. From the very first moment, he carried a kind of calm with him that made the world feel steadier, safer. And in those first few conversations, I learned that he was thoughtful, reserved, and full of little surprises. Our love didn't burst like fireworks. It grew like a steady flame, burning brighter with each passing day. He took me on long walks, listened to my dreams with genuine attention, and never raised his voice. Everyone who knew him said I was lucky, and they were right. For 20 years, I had the kind of marriage that felt unshakable, until I realized that even the most perfect love can have shadows. The shadow in our marriage was the study, that single locked room in the corner of our home. From the very beginning, David made it clear, that place was his sanctuary. When we moved into our first house together, I thought we would share everything. Closets, finances, secrets whispered in the dark. But on the first night, as we unpacked boxes, David gently placed his hand on my shoulder, guided me away from the heavy wooden door, and said with a firmness I had never heard before, "This room is off limits. Please promise me." I laughed at first, thinking it was some silly quirk, but his expression didn't soften. His eyes, usually warm, were now sharp, carrying a weight I didn't understand. It unsettled me, and so I nodded. "All right," I said. "I promise." And just like that, the boundary was set. Years passed, and life was kind. We had family dinners, anniversaries, holidays full of warmth. David was everything a woman could ask for in a partner. He supported me in my career, celebrated my successes, and comforted me in failures. If ever I doubted him, all I had to do was look at the way he held my hand in public, proud and unashamed. But the study was always there, a silent question mark in the corner of our life. He would enter it at odd hours, sometimes late at night when he thought I was asleep. I would hear the faint creak of the door, the click of the lock turning, and then silence, except for the scratch of a pen or the soft hum of something mechanical. I tried not to notice, but the human heart is curious. The more you're told no, the more that word burns into your bones. On certain evenings, when David stayed late inside, I would walk past the study and pause. My fingers itched to touch the handle. Once I even knelt down to peek under the door, but all I could see was the faint sliver of light and shadows moving. "Don't linger there," he said one night, his voice startling me from behind. I hadn't even heard him approach. "It's not for you." There was no anger in his tone, but there was a finality, as if the very idea of me crossing that line would break something fragile between us. So I stepped back, apologized, and tried to bury the curiosity. After all, what is one locked room compared to decades of love? But the room had its presence. Sometimes, when guests visited, they would ask casually, "What's in there?" And David would smile politely and change the subject. I always wondered what they thought. Maybe a personal library, maybe a messy office he was embarrassed about. But only I knew the weight behind that lock, the unspoken rule that I had agreed to carry. Over time, I convinced myself it didn't matter. I told myself that everyone has a private corner of their soul, something they don't share, even with the one they love most. Maybe the room was simply that for David, and yet the small signs continued to nag me. A faint scent of ink, or was it chemicals? A drawer of keys where one key was always missing. The way he would close his laptop quickly if I walked into the room too suddenly. I reminded myself of the vow, the promise I had made. But late at night when he slept beside me, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder, what could possibly be so important that he would guard it with his life? I didn't know then that one day, the answer to that question would shatter everything I thought I knew about my husband. The study became almost like a living presence in our home. At first, I tried not to notice it, but the more years went by, the more that wooden door seemed to breathe with secrets I was not allowed to know. When friends came over, their eyes would roam over the house, complimenting the kitchen, the garden, the living room, and inevitably, someone would glance at that door. "What's in there?" a cousin once asked during a family dinner. David chuckled softly, but his hand tightened around his glass. "Just an old office." "Nothing special," he replied quickly. His tone was casual, but I knew him too well. It wasn't casual at all. Sometimes I would walk down the hallway and feel that the room was listening to me. Strange, I know. But there were nights when I swore I heard whispers, faint and muffled, as if someone was inside talking. Once, I pressed my ear against the door, heart racing. It wasn't words, exactly. More like the sound of a man rehearsing a speech or confessing to a wall. The smells unsettled me, too. There was the scent of ink, yes, but also something metallic, sharp, like iron or blood. One winter evening, I smelled smoke, faint, like burnt paper, and nearly panicked. I knocked hard, calling his name. The door opened just enough for David to peer out. His face was calm, his voice measured. "Everything's fine. Just testing something." He closed the door again before I could say another word. I told myself I was imagining things, but doubt is a slow poison. It seeps into every part of your heart. I began to wonder, did he have another life? Another obsession? Was there something about him I had never truly known? There was one night I will never forget. The house was quiet, our daughter asleep in her room. I was up late in the kitchen when I noticed the faint glow coming from under the study door. It wasn't unusual, but this time the door was slightly ajar. My breath caught. After years of nothing but locked silence, it was open, just a crack, but open. I stepped closer, every muscle tense. Through that narrow gap, I could see the edge of a desk cluttered with papers, something that looked like a camera stand, and was that a photograph? My hand reached out, almost on its own, but before I could push the door further, David's voice came from behind me. "What are you doing?" I froze. He was standing in the hallway, his expression unreadable. Not angry, not soft, just cold. He moved past me, pushed the door closed, and turned the key. Then he looked at me, his eyes holding mine with a weight I couldn't bear. "Don't," he said quietly. "Please, don't break your promise." That was the first time in our marriage I felt truly shut out. After that night, my curiosity only grew heavier. I began noticing small details I had ignored before. How he always kept the key in his pocket, never leaving it behind. How the study window was always shut, curtains drawn. How sometimes he emerged looking drained, pale, as though he had been carrying the weight of the world inside. I thought about asking him directly, demanding the truth. But each time I tried, the words died in my throat. What if I didn't like the answer? What if the man I had loved all these years wasn't who I thought he was? And so I kept my silence. I played the role of the faithful wife, smiling at dinners, laughing at jokes, pretending the locked door didn't gnaw at my soul. But deep down, I knew whatever David was hiding in that study would one day come to light. And when it did, it would change everything. The day it all shifted began like any other. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind you never imagine will divide your life into before and after. David sat at the breakfast table, his coffee cooling untouched, his gaze lost somewhere I couldn't follow. He had been distracted for weeks, but that morning there was something final in his silence. I remember asking him if everything was all right. He smiled faintly, that soft, practiced smile he always used to reassure me, and said, "I'm fine." Just tired, but his eyes carried a weight I couldn't name. That afternoon the phone call came. A neighbor, panic in her voice. David had collapsed in the driveway. My world shrank to a tunnel as I rushed to the hospital, heart pounding with fear I couldn't control. The sterile smell of disinfectant, the cold fluorescent lights, the endless hallways. It all blurred into a nightmare that refused to end. When I finally saw him, lying in the hospital bed, machines humming around him, I barely recognized the man I loved. His skin was pale, his breath shallow. The doctor's words, massive stroke, unpredictable, critical, echoed in my head like thunder. I clung to his hand, willing strength into him, whispering promises I wasn't sure he could even hear. And then, with the little strength he had left, he turned his head toward me. His lips trembled, his voice was barely more than a whisper, but I heard him. "Naomi, the study. Promise me, never go inside." The room seemed to tilt. Even at the edge of death, he was still guarding that room, still binding me with secrets. Tears blurred my vision. "David, don't talk like that," I begged. "You'll come home. We'll be fine." But he just squeezed my hand weakly, eyes pleading with me to give him my word. And I did. I promised. Because what else could I do in that moment? He needed peace, and if that meant carrying his secret for him, I thought I could bear it. Hours later, he slipped away. Just like that. No warning, no second chances, just silence. The house without him was unbearable. Every corner echoed with his absence. But the study became something else entirely. It wasn't just a locked door anymore. It was a tomb of unanswered questions. Each time I passed it, I felt the memory of his last words. "Promise me." For weeks I tried to honor him. I busied myself with paperwork, funeral arrangements, consoling our daughter, Chloe. But every night, when the house grew quiet, my thoughts circled back to that door. Why guard it until his dying breath? What truth was so heavy that even death couldn't loosen his grip on it? I told myself I would never betray him. But grief is a strange companion. It twists, it gnaws, it demands answers. And eventually it began whispering that maybe the only way to understand him, to truly say goodbye, was to step into the one place he had forbidden. That was when the promise I made at his bedside started to fracture. 2 months passed before I could even bring myself to enter David's study. At first, I avoided that hallway altogether. I couldn't bear to walk past the door without hearing his voice in my head. "Promise me." I would take the long way around, pretending the room wasn't there. But grief has a cruel way of circling back. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder the silence from that door became. It wasn't until the call from David's attorney, Mr. Harrison, that everything began to unravel. He asked me to come to his office on a Tuesday morning. His tone was formal but unusually hesitant, and that alone made me uneasy. When I arrived, he greeted me with the polite sympathy people reserve for widows. Gentle smiles, soft handshakes, hushed voices. I had come to hate that tone. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, adjusting his glasses nervously, "your husband left something for you. He was very specific about the timing." He slid a small box across the desk toward me, along with an envelope bearing my name in David's handwriting. My hands shook before I even touched them. Inside the box lay a heavy antique key. Its handle was ornate, carved into the shape of a single leaf, smooth with age, cold, significant, the kind of key that seemed to belong to another century. I turned it over in my hand, heart pounding, and looked up at Mr. Harrison. "What does this open?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. "The study," he replied quietly. The room seemed to still. My throat tightened. That one word, study, slammed into me harder than the stroke that had taken him. Mr. Harrison explained that David had left explicit instructions: the key, the letter, and nothing else. He wasn't allowed to answer questions. He wasn't allowed to guide me. My husband, even in death, had orchestrated this moment with precision. With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope. "My dearest Naomi, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I know what I asked of you on my deathbed, and I know I made you promise. But now I must release you from that vow. The study holds truths I never had the courage to share with you while alive. They are yours to discover at your own pace. Inside on the desk, you will find my journal. It will explain everything. Love always, David." I pressed the letter to my chest, shaking. Relief, dread, love, and betrayal tangled into one suffocating knot. Why had he made me swear to stay away, only to reveal this after he was gone? What was he protecting me from? That night, I sat alone in the dim kitchen, the key resting on the table before me like a living thing. I couldn't take my eyes off it. My hands itched to use it, yet guilt held me back, like stepping through that door would make me a traitor to my own husband. But by morning, guilt had shifted into determination. I needed to know. I walked down the hallway, every step echoing louder than the last. My breath caught as I stood before the door I had avoided for 2 decades. The lock stared back at me, daring me to cross the line. I slipped the key in. It turned smoothly, almost eagerly, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. The door swung open with a long, reluctant creak, and with one step across the threshold, I left behind the woman I had been and entered the world my husband had kept hidden all his life. The air inside the study was thick, as if the room had been holding its breath for 20 years, waiting for me. At first glance, it didn't look like a study at all. It looked like a shrine. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled not with novels or academic volumes, but with thick binders labeled in David's precise handwriting. Papers lay neatly stacked on the desk, each bound by string, untouched by dust, as though he had been here just yesterday. And then there were the photographs. Dozens of them, framed and unframed, pinned to corkboards, tucked between books. I stepped closer, my breath catching when I realized what they showed. Orchids. Not just any orchids, but every kind I had ever admired in magazines, in gardens, at exhibitions. I remembered pointing them out over the years, casually in passing. "Look at that one, David. Isn't it beautiful?" And here they were, preserved, catalogued, studied. A collection of my passion, hidden away in his forbidden room. On the desk sat a single leather-bound journal, placed squarely in the center like it was waiting for me. My hand shook as I picked it up. The first page bore his handwriting. "Naomi, this is the story I could never tell you out loud. If you are reading it, it means I am gone. Please read carefully. Every answer you seek is here." The words blurred as tears stung my eyes. I turned the page, desperate for what came next. He wrote of his childhood in Lake Arrowhead, a place he had sworn to leave behind. He described a house called Crestwood Estate, where memories of cruelty and betrayal still haunted him. His brothers, Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah, had tormented him, stealing from him, mocking his dreams. His father, broken by debt and drink, had sold the estate in secret years later. But 4 years ago, David had bought it back. I froze, my eyes scanning the page again and again to be sure I wasn't misreading. All this time, while I thought he was on business trips, while I believed he was just too busy to take time away, he had been returning to that place. He had been rebuilding it, stone by stone, turning it into something new. The journal went on to explain his illness, an aneurysm diagnosed years before his stroke. The doctors had given him 2 to 5 years, and instead of sharing the burden with me, he had chosen silence. Silence, and a secret project. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle the sob rising in my throat. Every page was a revelation. Every sentence was a confession. And with each one, the man I thought I knew became a stranger I was only beginning to understand. Then I found the envelope tucked into the back of the journal. Inside was a deed. The Crestwood estate. In my name. For a long moment, I just sat there. The journal open before me. The deed in my hand. The photographs of orchids watching silently from the walls. David hadn't just left me memories. He had left me a mystery, a fortune, and, whether I wanted it or not, a battle. Because as his words warned in the final line of that journal, Naomi, they will come for this house. My brothers will not stop, and when they do, you must be ready. The deed trembled in my hands as though it carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. Crestwood Estate. The name itself felt foreign on my tongue, yet reading it sent a strange chill through me. David had bought back his childhood home. But why had he hidden it from me? I couldn't rest until I saw it with my own eyes. The next morning, I packed a small bag, left a note for Chloe, and drove north toward Lake Arrowhead. The road wound higher and higher into the mountains, the air thinning, the pines rising like silent guardians on either side. My hands clutched the steering wheel, heart pounding with every mile. Finally, the house appeared. Crestwood Estate stood tall and solemn at the end of a long gravel drive. Its stone walls were weathered but strong, ivy climbing up one side, windows gleaming in the pale light. It wasn't a ruin. It wasn't abandoned. It was alive, reborn. I stepped out of the car, stunned. The front gates were locked, but David's key slid in easily. The iron bars creaked as they opened, groaning like they hadn't been touched in years, though clearly they had. I walked the path slowly, the crunch of gravel beneath my feet echoing in the silence of the vast property. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and fresh paint. David had kept it immaculate, every room restored with care. But it was more than restoration, it was transformation. In what had once been a parlor, there was now a sunlit studio, canvases leaning against the walls. Half-finished paintings, delicate sketches, bursts of color. Orchids again. Dozens of them, painted in every hue and form. Tears welled in my eyes as realization struck. This was his secret life. Not betrayal, not another family, not shame. Creation. Beauty, love. Yet, the deeper I wandered, the more questions rose. Why had he done all this in silence? Why had he left me out of something so extraordinary? In the master bedroom on the writing desk, I found another journal. This one was newer, its pages still smelling faintly of ink. Inside were sketches of renovations, notes about contractors, supply lists, evidence of years of careful planning. But as I turned the pages, a darker thread emerged. David had written about visits from his brothers. Marcus, Elijah, Isaiah. He described their anger, their threats, their attempts to claim what he had rebuilt. They will come again, he wrote. They believe Crestwood belongs to them, but it is mine now, ours. I will protect it for Naomi. I closed the book, hands trembling, as if on cue, a sound broke the silence. Tires crunching on gravel outside. I rushed to the window and froze. 3 men were climbing out of a black SUV, their faces sharp with familiarity. I had seen them once at David's funeral, standing at the back, whispering to each other. His brothers. They were here. I backed away from the window, heart hammering. This house was supposed to be mine now. David had left it to me. But looking at their grim expressions, I knew this was only the beginning of a battle I wasn't ready for. And yet, ready or not, it had already begun. Their footsteps echoed against the marble entryway before I could even compose myself. The heavy door groaned open, and there they stood, 3 shadows from David's past stepping into my present. Marcus, the eldest, moved first. His presence filled the room, tall and broad-shouldered, his jaw tight with authority. Elijah followed, leaner but with a smirk that unsettled me. Isaiah, the youngest, hung back, but his eyes were cold, watchful, calculating. Well, Marcus said, his voice dripping with disdain. The widow found her way here. I straightened my back, clutching David's journal to my chest like a shield. This is my home now. David left it to me. Elijah laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. David had no right. This was our house long before you came along. He stole it just like he stole everything else. My voice trembled but didn't break. He bought it back, legally. I have the deed. And it's in my name. Isaiah stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. Do you even know what you're holding? That house is more than walls and windows. It's our legacy. And you're nothing but an outsider. The words sliced through me, but I refused to let them see my fear. I'm his wife. I was with him for 20 years. If this place mattered so much to you, where were you when he restored it? Where were you when he poured his soul into rebuilding every corner of it? For a moment, silence. Then Marcus sneered. He always was dramatic, hiding away in his little world, painting flowers while the rest of us dealt with reality. And now you think you can keep it from us? I wanted to shout, to demand they leave, but their presence filled the estate with a suffocating tension. I realized this wasn't just about walls or land, it was about power. About old grudges that hadn't died with David. Over the next few weeks, their harassment became relentless. Letters from their lawyers arrived almost daily, claiming the estate had been fraudulently obtained, that David had coerced their father into signing away rights decades ago. Strangers came to the property, snapping photographs, trespassing, leaving behind trash as intimidation. At night, I lay awake in the vast, echoing house, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Footsteps, doors creaking, whispers outside the windows. I began to fear I wasn't just fighting for a deed. I was fighting for my safety, for Chloe's future, for the very truth of the man I had loved. One evening, exhausted and desperate, I returned to the study. I flipped through David's journal again, searching for answers. And there, tucked inside a hidden pocket at the back, was a flash drive. My breath caught. I rushed to the old laptop still on his desk, plugged it in, and waited as the files opened. Dozens of videos appeared, each labeled with a date. The earliest was from nearly 5 years ago. With trembling hands, I clicked the first one. David's face filled the screen. His eyes looked tired, but his voice was steady. Naomi, he began, if you're watching this, it means the fight has reached you. I didn't want this for you, but I knew my brothers wouldn't let go. So I've documented everything. Every payment, every contract, every lie they've tried to spin. This flash drive holds the truth. Enough to protect you. Tears blurred my eyes as I clicked through the files. There were scans of deeds, recordings of heated conversations, even a video of Marcus shouting at David in a parking lot, threatening him. It was all here, proof. For the first time since his death, I felt his presence, not just in memory, but standing with me, guiding me, protecting me from beyond. And as I sat there, clutching that laptop in the dim glow of the study, I knew one thing with certainty. This battle wasn't over, but neither was I. The first hearing was set for late autumn. By then, the chill of the mountains had seeped into my bones, and Crestwood, though beautiful, felt more like a fortress under siege than a home. Chloe begged me to leave it all behind, sell the house, walk away, find peace. But every time I looked at David's journals, every time I replayed his trembling voice in those videos, I knew walking away wasn't an option. He had built this place for us. For me, the courtroom was cold in a different way. Marble walls, wooden benches, the smell of paper and ink. Marcus sat across from me in a crisp suit, Elijah smirking beside him, Isaiah avoiding my eyes. Their lawyer, a sharp-tongued man with a predatory smile, painted me as nothing more than a grieving widow who had manipulated a dying man. She has no blood claim to Crestwood, he thundered. This estate belongs to the Sterling brothers, as it always has. My own attorney, young but determined, rose with the flash drive in his hand. Then explain these, he said. He pressed play, and the room filled with David's voice. The jury watched as video after video revealed the truth. Marcus threatening him. Elijah admitting their father had gambled away rights. Isaiah confessing he wanted nothing to do with Crestwood until David had restored its worth. And then the documents, meticulous contracts, notarized signatures, bank transfers, all showing how David had bought back the property legally and with his own funds. For once, the brothers sat silent. But the battle wasn't over. During a recess, Marcus cornered me in the hallway. His face was red, his fists clenched. "You think this is over, Naomi? A few videos won't erase history. Crestwood belongs to us. You can't keep it." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steadier than I felt. "David built this place to escape you, to protect himself from everything you took from him. He left it to me because he trusted I would never let it fall into your hands. And I won't." His glare burned into me, but I refused to look away. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider. I was the shield David had chosen. The court ruled in my favor. The estate was mine beyond contest. The brothers stormed out, their legacy shattered, their power broken. Yet even as I held the deed in my hands again, I knew the fight had left scars. That night, back in the study, I lit a single candle and opened David's final journal, the one I hadn't dared to finish. Near the back, taped to the inside cover, was a small brass key, different from the ornate leaf key that had opened the study. Beneath it, in his handwriting, only 4 words: "For Naomi." The vault. My heart pounded as I searched the room, until my eyes landed on the floorboards beneath his desk. A faint outline. I pried them open and found a small iron chest, the brass lock waiting patiently. With shaking hands, I inserted the key. The lock clicked. The lid lifted. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, sealed envelopes, each with my name written in David's hand. The first one read, "Open this on your birthday." Another, "For Chloe's graduation." Another, "For the day you feel most alone." And at the very bottom, a thick envelope marked simply, "For the end." I broke down, sobbing into the chest of letters, clutching them to my heart. He hadn't just left me a house. He hadn't just left me proof. He had left me his voice, stretched across the years, a promise that even in death, he would never leave me completely. Crestwood wasn't just a house. It was his legacy, his love, his secret life, now mine to carry. And as I stood in that study, surrounded by orchids painted by his hand, I whispered into the silence, "I kept your promise, David, and I'll keep it still." The days after the trial passed in a haze of relief and exhaustion. Crestwood was finally mine, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a responsibility. Heavy, sacred, impossible to set down. I spent hours in the study, surrounded by David's journals and the unopened letters from the vault. Sometimes I would just sit at his desk, running my fingers over the grain of the wood, breathing in the faint smell of ink and cedar, waiting for the silence to speak. Chloe visited on weekends. At first, she hated the estate. She said it was too big, too empty, too haunted by memories of a father who had loved in silence. But one afternoon, she found the gallery. She stood in front of a painting of an orchid, purple, delicate, luminous, and whispered, "He painted this for you, didn't he?" Her eyes softened, and for the first time since David's death, I saw something other than anger in her face. We began opening the letters slowly, one by one, never rushing. On my birthday, I opened the first. David's handwriting flowed across the page like he had written it only yesterday. "If you're reading this, Naomi, I hope you're smiling. Don't let the years make you bitter. Plant something today, something that will outlive you," so I did. I planted orchids in the old greenhouse he had restored at the edge of the property. Soon it became my sanctuary, just as the study had been his. The house began to breathe differently. The walls no longer felt like they were pressing in on me. The echoes weren't hollow anymore. They carried whispers of love, promises preserved in paper and paint. Crestwood wasn't a burden now. It was a gift, a place where Chloe and I could begin again. On quiet evenings, I would sit in the study with a candle lit and read his words aloud, as though speaking them into the air might summon him back. And in a way it did. His presence lingered not as a ghost, but as a comfort. In time, I realized David hadn't locked me out to punish me. He had locked me out to protect me. He carried his secrets alone because he thought they would break me. What he never understood was that love isn't just about protection, it's about trust. And though I resented his silence, I finally forgave him. The last letter, the one marked for the end, still sits unopened in the vault. I don't know when I'll have the courage to read it. Maybe on the day I feel the world slipping away, when I need his voice one last time. Until then, I carry the knowledge that it's there, waiting. A final thread connecting me to the man who shaped my life in ways I am still discovering. I often walk the halls of Crestwood at night, the lantern light flickering against the walls, orchids blooming in every corner, their petals glowing like fragments of his spirit. And as I stand in the study, gazing at the paintings he left behind, I whisper the same words I said the day I opened the vault. I kept your promise, David, and I always will. The study became my refuge after David's death. I would sit for hours at his desk, tracing the grain of the wood, reading his journals again and again, searching for pieces of him that I might have missed. I thought I had seen everything, that the journals, the photographs, the deed, and the flash drive were the whole truth. But one stormy evening, when the wind rattled the windows and the rain lashed against Crestwood, I noticed something strange. The candlelight flickered across the bookshelves, and for the first time, I saw a faint seam in the wood paneling behind David's chair. My heart quickened. It wasn't just part of the design. The line was too precise, too deliberate. I stood and pressed my hand against it. To my astonishment, the panel shifted slightly under my touch. A hidden door. My breath caught. For 20 years, David had kept me out of this study. And even after everything I had uncovered, he had still hidden something more. With trembling fingers, I searched along the edge until I found a small latch. It clicked softly, and the panel swung open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A draft of cold, musty air rose up to meet me. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But grief and curiosity are powerful companions. I lit a lantern and stepped inside. The staircase was steep, carved directly into the stone foundation of the house. My footsteps echoed as I descended, each creak of the wood reminding me I was trespassing in a world David had never meant me to find. When I reached the bottom, the lantern light revealed a small underground chamber. Unlike the study above, this room was stark and unfinished, bare stone walls, a single work table, and metal filing cabinets lined against one side. Dust coated everything, but it was organized, meticulous, just like David. I approached the table first. On it lay stacks of cassette tapes, each labeled with dates. My hand shook as I picked one up. October 3rd, 1998. That was the year we married. Another, June 12th, 2005. Chloe had just turned 6. And another, December 21st, 2017, 2 years before his diagnosis. There were dozens of them. Recordings. With trembling hands, I found an old tape recorder on the shelf. I slipped one of the cassettes inside and pressed play. David's voice filled the room, younger, steadier, but unmistakably his. If anyone ever hears this, it means I've failed to keep the past buried. But the truth is, some things never die. My brothers will tell you Crestwood was stolen. What they won't tell you is that Father made a deal, one that destroyed us all. And I've been paying for it ever since. I froze, clutching the recorder. What deal? What had he been paying for? I listened for hours, tape after tape, each one unraveling a story more complicated than I could have imagined. David had discovered that their father had sold Crestwood not just for money, but to cover up debts owed to dangerous men. Debts connected to a shadowy syndicate in the city, the kind that didn't forgive or forget. When David secretly bought the house back, he hadn't just angered his brothers, he had revived old enemies. One tape chilled me to the bone. I can't tell Naomi, his voice whispered through the static. If she knew what I was tangled in, she'd leave. She'd take Chloe and run, and maybe that would be safest. But I can't let them win. Crestwood is more than walls. It's the proof that I can reclaim what they stole from me, from us. And if I have to carry this weight alone, so be it. Tears blurred my eyes as I pressed pause. He hadn't locked me out because he didn't love me. He had locked me out because he loved me too much to risk dragging me into his darkness. Still, questions gnawed at me. Who were these men he spoke of? Were they still out there? And if so, would they come for me now that David was gone? I shoved the thought aside and continued searching the chamber. In the filing cabinets, I found folders stuffed with contracts, letters, even newspaper clippings. Stories of disappearances, of bankruptcies, of accidents that didn't seem accidental at all. David had been investigating his own family's history, piecing together a truth darker than I could ever have guessed. And then, in the very bottom drawer, I found a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front. My hand shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with David's handwriting. Naomi, if you've found this place, it means the brothers weren't the only ones after me. Be careful. Trust no one outside Chloe. I've left one final safeguard in the vault upstairs. If they come for you, it will be the only thing that can protect you. The lantern flickered as if the room itself shivered. I clutched the letter to my chest, my heart racing. He wasn't just fighting his brothers. He had been fighting ghosts from the past that might still be very much alive. And now, whether I wanted it or not, that fight had passed to me. I went back upstairs with the letter clutched in my fist, the lantern's flame guttering in the draft behind me. The panel clicked shut so neatly you'd never know a staircase hid there. For a long moment I just stood in the study, listening to the pulse in my ears and the old house settling around me, like a creature curling back into sleep. Then I locked the door and crossed to the vault. The little brass key for the letters still sat in the top drawer, beside a small velvet pouch I hadn't noticed before. I lifted it, and something hard thudded against my palm. A plain black USB drive and a SIM card wrapped in masking tape with David's careful block letters. Only if threatened. A prickle ran up my spine. Only if threatened. I slid open the vault, past the neat stacks of envelopes we were saving for birthdays and quiet storms. Behind them, taped flat against the steel, was a manila folder. A single line marked the tab, Contingency. Inside lay a typed instruction sheet, 3 pages long, with each step numbered and double-spaced like a recipe. Step 1. Power on the old laptop in the study. Do not connect to Wi-Fi yet. Step 2. Insert the black USB. Run the file labeled hermes.exe. Step 3. Follow the prompts. It will ask for the name of our favorite flower. You know it. Step 4. When unlocked, you will see 2 options, release and hold. Select hold unless you are physically threatened. Step 5. If you select release, the contents will be transmitted to the 3 outlets listed below, to the county recorder, and to an encrypted address. Don't worry about the how. Under that, 3 newsroom names I recognized, and an email address that was only a string of letters and numbers. Beneath, handwritten in pen, Naomi, if you reach this page, I'm sorry. But if you ever feel afraid, really afraid, choose release. It will make noise. It will protect you the way I couldn't in life. I exhaled shakily, set the sheet down, and stared out the study window. Dusk had slipped into the pines. The gravel drive was a gray ribbon between the trees. I told myself I was imagining it when a dark shape shifted near the gate, then vanished in the gloom like a thought you can't quite catch. My phone buzzed on the desk and I jumped. An unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then answered. Mrs. Sterling? The voice was a woman's, low and steady. My name is Mara Ellison. I'm a reporter with the Ledger. I'm not giving any more interviews, I said, too fast. After the trial, I'd learned how quickly sympathy curdles into curiosity. Please contact my attorney. I'm not calling about the trial, she said. I'm calling about Summit Ridge Holdings. I don't know what that is. Yes, you do, she said softly. Not by that name, maybe. But your husband did. The silence stretched. My eyes drifted toward the panel behind the chair, the tapes, the manila folder. Why are you calling me? Because David sent me a message the week before he died, she said. He told me if anyone ever threatened you at Crestwood, I should come. He said you might need a friend who doesn't scare easily. Something broke loose in my chest. Relief or fear, I couldn't tell. If this is a trick, it's not, she said. I can prove it. He used a phrase no one else would know. He said, "Tell Naomi the blue orchid blooms in winter." Does that mean anything? My throat tightened. The painting he'd made for me, the rare hybrid he'd hunted for years, the one he said reminded him of the day we met because I wore a scarf the exact impossible shade. It means everything, I whispered. Then we should talk, she said. But not on the phone. We agreed to meet the next morning at a diner in town, the kind where the coffee is always too strong and the waitresses call you honey. That night I slept badly. Twice I jolted awake convinced I'd heard footsteps on the porch. When I finally surrendered to insomnia, I took the USB from the velvet pouch and set it beside the laptop, a talisman I didn't yet dare to use. At first light, I drove to the diner. The sky was a thin wash of pink over the ridge, and the lake was a dull mirror. Inside, a woman with short dark hair and a coat too thin for the mountain chill raised a hand. She looked younger than her voice, or maybe the sort of person life had asked to grow up too quickly. "You look like him," she said, as if startled by her own thought, "in the way you carry your worry. Is that a compliment?" "It's a truth." She slid a folder across the table. "This is what I can give you now. Proof that Summit Ridge Holdings is a shell, one of the fronts the Sterling brothers used when they still thought they could launder money through land speculation. Your husband traced it back to a syndicate account 4 years ago. He pulled the pin. They never forgave him. I paged through the copies, LLC filings, addresses that were nothing but mail drops, the same names rotating like a shell game. One of them pricked like a thorn. A law office I recognized from the letterhead that had tormented my mailbox. Elijah's firm. He thinks he's clever, Mara said. But he was messy in 2012, and again in 2019. Your husband found the seams. Why tell me this? I asked. Why not publish? Because it's not ready, she said. It's a hydra. You cut off one head and 3 grow back. I need more before I can run with it. And because I think you're in danger. Not from your brothers-in-law anymore. From the people who liked them as clients because they were useful. I told her about the tapes, the basement, the instruction sheet, the USB labeled Hermes. She whistled under her breath. He built a dead man's switch, she said. Good. If anyone pushes you, you push back harder than they expect. What if they don't push me? I said, hearing how small I sounded. What if they just take? Then we make sure there's nothing left to take quietly. When I got back to Crestwood, a white envelope sat tucked under the wiper of my car. No stamp, no name. Inside, a single photo, a shot of me walking into the diner. On the back, block letters, stay in the house. Stop digging. Next time we come to the door. My hands went cold. The backyard felt suddenly too open, the trees too close. I locked every window, every latch. And I finally did what the page had told me to do. I powered on the old laptop without connecting to the Wi-Fi, inserted the USB, and ran Hermes, a black screen, a flicker. Then a prompt like a joke. Password, the name of our favorite flower. I typed it. The pet name only we used for the blue orchid's hybrid strain. The screen bloomed into a simple interface, 2 buttons, just as he'd written, release and hold. Below them, a readout of files queued like bullets in a magazine. Scans, spreadsheets, affidavits. The video of Marcus in the parking lot, plus items I hadn't seen. A folder named Willow. Another called Ledger. The last, Ridgeline bonds. My finger hovered over hold. A small line of text winked beneath the buttons. Hold mode pings every 24 hours. If no response, auto-release. I stared at the clock. It was already counting down. A thin gray circle shrinking, I whispered. Okay. That evening, the power flickered. Once, twice, then went out. The house exhaled into a deeper dark, and the silence was so complete I could hear the distant slap of water against dock posts. I lit candles and moved through the halls, checking doors. At the kitchen sink, a faint chemical smell tugged at my nose, sweet and wrong. I followed it to the mudroom and found the back door cracked. Just an inch, but enough for the wind to nose in. A scrap of paper lay on the floor, damp from the fog. 4 words in the same block hand as the photo. 24 hours, decide. I called Mara. No answer. I called Chloe. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright with the noise of a campus cafe behind her. Mom, everything okay? Yes, I lied. Stay on campus tonight. Don't drive up. Promise me. Mom, what? Promise. A beat. I promise. I hung up, set my phone face down, and carried the laptop and the USB to the study. If they were going to test me, I would decide when the test ended. I pressed hold the countdown reset. The little dot pulsed green. Somewhere, something David had built took a breath and told the world. Not yet. I slept in the study that night, a blanket over my shoulders, the old desk lamp my only star. The house creaked like an animal resting. Near dawn, a thud sounded at the porch, the quick, hollow report of weight on old wood. I rose, heart in my throat, and stood in the shadow where I could see the front door without being seen. A man's outline blurred against the frosted glass. He didn't knock. He just stood there, then another shape joined him. And another. 3 ghosts on my threshold, patient as weather. I picked up the phone and dialed the sheriff. The line rang and rang. When the voice finally came, it was thick with sleep and annoyance. Ma'am, if they're not trespassing, they're on my porch. Porch is part of the structure, he said. They step inside, you call me back. By the time they step inside, it'll be too late. Ma'am, he repeated, the word hardening. We can't send a unit for someone standing on a porch at dawn. You have yourself a good day now, the click rang in my ear. I set the phone down and felt a steady, surprising calm rise up under the fear like bedrock. If I couldn't count on the official call, I would use the one David had given me. I walked to the door and set the chain, then cracked it an inch. Cold hit my face. The 3 men turned toward the slice of light like flowers tracking the sun. You need to leave, I said, amazed at the steadiness of my voice. Now. The tallest stepped forward. He wore a worker's jacket, cheap boots, eyes the flat color of unswept ash. Morning, Mrs. Sterling, pretty place. Shame if anything happened to it. We've met? I asked. He smiled without warmth. You've met better versions of me. I'm recording, I lied. Good, he said. Record this. Some folks don't like old business being dragged into daylight. Some folks think a widow should mind her garden and leave the books closed. Books are already open, I said. Page 1. You step off my porch. He studied me. Something like respect or maybe boredom flickered. He tapped the jam with 2 knuckles, a signal to the others. 24 hours, he said. Then we carry the conversation. They walked back down the steps. Their truck's tail lights glowed like coals as it rolled down the drive and vanished into the trees. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt. For a minute I stood with my forehead against the wood, breathing. Then I went to the study, woke up Hermes, and clicked release. The button brightened like a flare. A status bar crawled. One by one, little check marks bloomed beside the outlets and addresses. Green, green, green. At the bottom, a new line appeared. Mirror. Complete. I didn't know where that mirror went. I only knew David had built it, and that he never built anything halfway. The first call came 20 minutes later. Not Mara, National. A producer with a voice too bright for morning asking for comment on documents she'd just received anonymously about Summit Ridge Holdings, and a county official whose name made my stomach drop. The second call was local. A different reporter, a different outlet, same breathless edge. The third was Mara at last, not breathless at all. You did it, she said. They came to the porch. And now they'll back up, she said. Snakes hate noise. They'll hiss, they'll posture, but they hate light and they hate attention. You just gave them both. What will they do? Test the fences, she said. And then look for lower ground. Stay on the high ground. I'm driving up. By noon, the Ledger had published a preliminary report. By afternoon, the county recorder acknowledged receipt of materials and announced an internal review. By evening, the sheriff's office, so sleepy at sunrise, issued a statement calling for calm and promising full cooperation with any lawful inquiries. I made tea, I didn't drink, watched the notifications pile up, ignored most of them. When someone pounded on the door at dusk, I nearly spilled the cup, until a familiar voice came through the wood. "Naomi? It's me." I unlatched the door to find Isaiah on the step in a windbreaker, hands raised like he expected a barrel or a curse. He looked smaller without his brothers, younger or maybe just less certain. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to ask you to let this run its course." "Which course is that?" "The one that ends without blood," he said hoarsely. "You think Marcus cares how it ends? You think Elijah does? They'll burn a forest to smoke out a rabbit. I'm the one who used to fill the canteens." I stared at him. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because the people you just woke up," he said, flicking a glance toward the trees. "They don't send letters. They don't issue statements. They send messages. They already sent you one. This morning, I said nothing." His mouth tightened. He took that as confirmation. "I'm not your ally," he said. "I can't be. But I'm not your enemy either. I'm done with that house." His eyes softened like a window catching late sun. "David wasn't like us." He tried not to be. That was his mistake and his grace. Don't let them make you more like us than like him. "Then what do you want?" "Time," he said. "For distance. For you, for me. Let the papers eat them. Let the law gnaw. Keep your head down. And if they don't stop, then you do what you did today," he said simply. "You make more noise than they can stand." After he left, the dark felt thinner somehow, like the first hint of dawn behind a ridge. I went back to the study and opened one of the letters not marked for any particular day. The paper was smooth, the ink slightly smudged where his hand must have rested. "My love," it began. "If the world feels loud, make your own music. If the world feels dangerous, make your own rules. If the world feels empty, fill it with something living." I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. Then I went to the greenhouse and watered the orchids one by one, murmuring their names like prayers. When I returned, a single email waited on the laptop, from the strange encrypted address on David's instruction sheet. No subject, no text. Just an attachment, a video clip, 20 seconds long, of David sitting at the study desk, filmed years earlier. He smiled in that crooked way that always undid me. "If you're seeing this," he said, "you did the brave thing. I knew you would. Now do the next brave thing. Don't look back." The clip ended. The screen held my reflection for a heartbeat. The tired widow, the reluctant warrior, the woman learning the edges of the word keeper. Then I closed the laptop, turned out the light, and let the house rest. Outside, the wind moved through the pines like breath. Somewhere down the mountain, phones rang in offices that preferred quiet. Somewhere up the mountain, light pressed against the dark, and in the study, beneath the painting of the impossible flower, a little green dot on a black screen pulsed, patient and steady, keeping time with my own. Naomi's life after pressing release did not return to quiet. Crestwood became a fortress of whispers, a beacon that drew attention she hadn't asked for but could no longer avoid. News vans sometimes parked at the bottom of the driveway. Strangers mailed letters, some praising David as a hero, some warning her to quit while you're ahead, and every few nights, headlights would pause too long at the gate before driving on. She learned to live in a kind of permanent dusk, never fully day, never fully night. But alongside the fear, something else grew. Resolve. Mara came often, bringing updates from her investigation. Each visit unraveled more threads, bank accounts hidden offshore, crooked officials whose names Naomi had heard at local galas, and ties stretching not just to the Sterling brothers, but far beyond. Naomi realized David had not only been shielding her from family secrets, he had been mapping a corruption web bigger than their small town could imagine. Then came the letter without a sender. It arrived one morning with the normal post, but the paper was thick, old-fashioned, and inside was a single sentence written in fountain ink. The vault is not empty yet. Naomi's breath stopped. She had believed she'd found everything, the journals, the tapes, the letters, the USB, but the note meant otherwise. That night, unable to resist, she returned to the study. The orchids glowed faintly in the lamplight. She opened the vault again and searched more carefully. At first, nothing. Then her fingers found a groove at the back of the compartment. She pressed. A small false panel slid free, revealing a hidden cavity. Inside lay a second key, heavier, iron, engraved with a symbol she didn't recognize, a circle crossed by 2 lines. On the floor beneath the vault, she noticed scratches she had never paid attention to. She pulled the rug aside and saw a trap door, so seamlessly fit into the boards it might have been overlooked for centuries. The iron key slid into its lock perfectly. The door groaned open, and Naomi descended into yet another layer of David's secret world. Here, the air was different, not just dusty, but alive with the smell of oil and ink. The chamber below was larger than the first, its stone walls lined with shelves of boxes, ledgers, and blueprints. At the center sat a massive oak table. Spread across it was a detailed map of the county with colored pins and strings connecting properties, businesses, even government buildings. Her eyes followed one red string to the courthouse, another to the bank, another to a nondescript warehouse near the river. This wasn't just about Crestwood. David had been tracing the veins of corruption, and Crestwood had been the heart-pumping blood through all of it. And there, tucked under the map, lay a final journal, thicker than all the rest. On its first page, in his sharp hand, David had written, "For Naomi, when you're ready to know everything." Naomi turned the last page of David's final journal as dawn bled pale gold through the study windows. Her hands trembled, not from fear anymore, but from the sheer weight of truth. David had not just been reclaiming Crestwood. He had been protecting it because Crestwood itself was the evidence. Beneath its foundations lay documents, blueprints, and ledgers of every deal his father and brothers had struck with corrupt men. The estate was both his sanctuary and his shield. By restoring it, by locking Naomi out, he had been buying time. Time to prepare. Time to build a safeguard she could one day wield. And now that safeguard was hers. The threats would not vanish overnight. The men on the porch, the syndicate in the city, the brothers' hatred, all of them would continue to circle. But Naomi was no longer the frightened widow staring at a locked door. She had David's map. She had his recordings. She had the vaults, the orchids, the letters, and most of all, his unshakable love written across every page he left behind. She closed the journal, pressed it to her chest, and whispered into the quiet room, "I understand now. And I'll finish what you started." The orchids swayed in the faint morning breeze from the open window, their petals glowing like fragments of David's spirit. Crestwood, once a house of secrets, had become a house of truth. And as Naomi stepped outside into the light, she knew this was not an ending at all, but the beginning of a legacy she would guard for the rest of her life.